Well, it's been a little while since I did one of these videos. I mean, actually, it's only been 2 weeks, but you know, life gets in the way. But still, with the Umamusume Cinderella Grey anime season 1 part 2, because I've always been saying it was Umamusume Cinderella Grey season 2, but actually it's not. It's just, the part 2 of part 1, whatever. But right now the anime is going to be mainly focusing on the rivalry of Oguri Cap and Tamma Oguri, and also the Japan Cup of 1988. So in this video I'm gonna talk about the rivalry between Oguri Cap and Tamma Oguri. So we're gonna be mainly focusing on the 3 races that both horses has participated with each other, and also the little subtle histories that the horses have with each other as well. So what really makes this rivalry very special is that Oguri Cap actually started off in like a regional racing scene, so it is not as competitive as the national racing scene, but later on in his career he actually transferred to the national scene. I feel like I've talked about this a lot of times, I swear to God, the last time I'm going to talk about this. But so he transferred from the regional race to the national race. And people were already very skeptical if Oguri could compete comfortably in the national races, because, it's an entirely different level from any regional race. And lo and behold, Oguri would blow all these doubts out of the water, with him winning every single race up until the October 30th 1988 Tenno Sho, where he finally lost against Tamma Oguri. And that would just spark the Ashen horse rivalry of that time, because both Oguri and Tamma had like a generational run, with them just winning every single race up until their showdown at the Tenno Sho, if you don't count Oguri's 2 losses in Katsumasu to March Tosho, and also Tamma's losses before she locked in and started running from October 18th of 1987. And also there was the notion at that point that gray horses can't run. This notion of gray horses can't run could be traced back to, wow, that's a long time, around 300 years ago, when the progenitor, you could say, of all gray gene fruitbreds, Alcock's Arabian, passed down his first gray genes to a single mare named Bab. And throughout the centuries, the gray color was seen as unlucky, but the tide began to change with a horse named the Tetrarch, an undefeated gray colt whose brilliance revived interest in gray horse. And in Japan, the saying gray horses can't run reflected on old military breeding traditions and superstitions, and that belief actually began to shake in Japan in the early 1970s, when gray horses like Major Osma and White Fontaine began to shake the belief. But it wasn't until the 1980s when the 2 legendary gray horses, Tamma and Oguri, truly make the myth shattered. And so their success turned gray horses from symbols of weakness into legends, and like the manga Cinderella Grey honors that transformation. So let's start talking about these horses. So Tamma Oguri was born from CB Cross and Green Chateau, and he was born on May 23rd of 1984 at the Nishikino Bokucho breeding farm. So a little bit backstory on the Nishikino breeding farm. It was created by Mr. Nishikino, and his dream was to produce Japan's best racing horse at his own racing ranch. But unlike large ranches such as the Shadai Farm, the Simboli Ranch, and the Major Ranch, the Nishikino Ranch, which is only a small private ranch, cannot have high-priced breeding mares. And it is not easy for them to have even stallions with high pedigrees and stuff. But Nishikino actually was paying keen attention to a horse named CB Cross, which we all know now is Tamma's father. And CB Cross would actually be called the White Lightning One because of his intensity and wit he showed during a straight line. And CB Cross was the perfect candidate for a breeding stallion for like a small ranch like the Nishikino Bokujo breeding farm, because at that point CB Cross didn't really have a very strong pedigree, so his breeding stallion cost was relatively low. And Mr. Nishikino would pair him up with Green Chateau, who left behind a record of 6 wins and 19 games. And although she didn't have any back-to-forth victories, she was actually a quite promising breeding mare, and he decided to pair him up with CB Cross, and on May 23rd of 1984, Tamma was born. What's very unfortunate is that Tamma Cross was born on the ranch when they were on the brink of bankruptcy. Because the ranch was founded with passion by retired horse racing professionals, it was soon forced into a corner by the harsh reality of the cost to maintain, a ranch of this size. And according to contemporary accounts, they were so desperate that they were willing to lend stallions for 3.6 liters of sake. And Tamma Cross was actually the ranch's last attempt at a comeback, but at that point he was just still a skinny pony. And to make matters even worse is that Tamma was born with a gray coat, and the superstition of gray horses can't run at that point was still alive and well. And the ranch actually ran out of money before even Tamma made his first debut race, and Tamma was sold off to another ranch. But the silver lining behind all this tragedy is that Tamma still had a chance to race, and according to the agreement, when Tamma was resold, the prize money he won would help rebuild Tamma's hometown ranch. But unfortunately, the ranch was closed before Tamma even got to his first race. And what makes it even worse is that Tamma lost his debut race in a crushing defeat in 7th place. And, to pile on even more tragedy, Tamma's backstory is fucking tragic in the anime, but in real life it is even more tragic, as 4 months after Tamma's debut race, his mother died of intestinal volvulus caused by the stress of being sold repeatedly, and everything that Tamma Cross could be called home no longer exists. And there was actually even rumors that the ranch was so desperate for money that they're willing to just sell Tamma to any ranch that would accept the fee. And there were rumors that Tamma was actually going to be sold to Oguri's ranch, which is the Funao Inaba breeding farm, but I couldn't find any definite source for this rumor, so I would say right now it's just a rumor. But in the anime, is represented in the fact that Tamma actually visited Kazamasu when he was little with her mother, and Kazamasu is of course Oguri's hometown. So this is like a little light representation of this story. So because of Tamma's terrible performance at his debut race in a grass racetrack, they immediately moved Tamma to a sand track. And at that time, moving a racehorse to the sand is a way of saying this horse has almost no future. And Tamma would actually do quite well in the dirt track, and he would be able to do quite well in the middle of the race. But unfortunately, he was involved in a pile-up in the race, and he would end up in 4th in the race. And after the race, he was diagnosed with an injury, and he had to take a month off for him to recover from his injuries. And upon return to the track, his jockey found out that Tamma was now too afraid to be in the pack to charge the lead group. And yes, he got PTSD from the pile-up accident. Tamma would actually win his 3rd race in the dirt track, but then they decided to transfer him back to a grass track, which he would fail to finish. So they decided to let's go back to the dirt track for his remaining 4 races, which Tamma would slowly become better at racing. And at his 9th race, they would decide to go back to a turf track. And this race was actually a little evaluation for they to see if Tamma has the potential for a steeplechase race. And this is kind of like a funeral to his normal racing career. But thankfully at that race he would lead a crushing victory, and he was even 0.1 seconds faster than the winner of a G2 race on the same day and at the same venue. And at this point, Tamma would finally find his footing, and he would continue to blast through every single opponent in his next 7 races, including 3 G1 victories, including the Kyoto Tenno Sho at April 29th of 1988, the Takarazuka Kinen at June 12th of 1988, and the October 30th, 1988 Tenno Sho Autumn, where he would win against Oguri Cap. And he was so dominant at this race that they would call him White Lightning too after his father CB Cross. And Tamma, finally he could be standing on his own 2 feet and gained a significant and formidable reputation as one of the strongest gray horses in history. But there was one horse at the same time who also was an underdog in itself, and who just transferred from the regional race to the national race, and that is of course Oguri Cat. And in terms of Oguri, do I even need to tell you more about him when all of you should know a lot about him? But let me just give you a little bit of rundown. So he was born on March 27th of 1985, so literally a year after Tamma. And he was born at the Funawa Inawa breeding farm, and his father is Dancing Cab, his mother is White Narubi. And he'll originally only be racing at the Katsumasu racecourse, which is a regional racecourse. So the qualifications to race there was not as high, or not even as close as high as any national race in Tokyo, in Kyoto. But because of his overwhelming potential that he showed in Katsumasu, where he only lost 2 times against March Tosho, he'll be transferred to the regional race, and he would participate in his first ever graded race on March 6th of 1988, which is the Pegasus Stakes. You can also see that in the Umamusume Cinderella Grey anime, which he won spectacularly, beating a lot of established national level racehorse. And he would just win all his races up until where he lost to Tammo Cross, the autumn Tenno Sho. And Oguri essentially entered the JRA as a winning streak monster from local races, and continue his miraculous winning streak. I wouldn't say it's really miraculous. Oguri was a monster in his own right. He didn't have any notion of fatigue or illness, and Oguri was the superstar who created the biggest horse racing craze in Japanese history after Symbolic Rudolph, and made everyone crazy about him. And everyone cheered for his victory because he was the perfect underdog story, and everyone hoped that Oguri would be the crown king, as he should be. And Tamma just so happened to be the old king who would be ousted, or who would be exiled. So it was unfortunate that in that day and age Tamma was seen as a villain, which he really shouldn't be, because he was getting cooked when he was little. His mother died. He was always getting transferred to other breeding farms. He was moving around continuously. He was basically getting tortured. And for him to be able to finally find his footing and start winning races, and then people start calling him the villain, it's just really fucking unfair to Tamma, to be honest. So now we have the perfect story where Oguri is the protagonist and Tamma is the antagonist. Now the plot. So the plot includes 3 major races that both of them participate in, which is the October 30th, 1988 Tenno Sho Autumn, the November 27th, 1988 Japan Cup, and finally the December 25th, 1988 Arima Kinen. And these 3 races will be, the races which technically settle the score on who was the better gray horse. So let's start talking about the first race, which is the October 30th, 1988 Tenno Sho Autumn. So other notable Umamusumes in this race is Cyrus Simboli, but Cyrus Simboli at this point, he was a shell of his former self. So the favorite to win in this Tenno Sho was actually Oguri Cap, with number 1 and most favorite to win, and Tamma being the second most favorite to win. And people were very excited for the gray horse showdown of the lifetime, as both horses had a winning streak already, and they had never lost a race in the national region up until this point in the Tenno Sho. So everyone was very excited. But in this Tenno Sho, Tamma would win against Oguri Cap. We look at the time right here. Tamma won by 0.2 seconds, and with 1 1/4 length faster in front of Oguri Cap. And seemingly at this race, Tamma has finally got rid of the PTSD of not being leading the race from the previous incident where the crowd up gave him PTSD and he would be starting at the back in any race after that. But in this Tenno Sho, Tamma seemingly gone back to his usual bravado, and he kept pacing at second place at this race, and in the end outpaced Oguri's in the final spurt and winning the 1988 Tenno Sho. And with Tamma's win in the Tenno Sho, it would just make the Grey Horse Showdown or the Grey Horse Rivalry even more intense, as right at the gate after the Tenno Sho is the November 27, 1988 Japan Cup, which both of them didn't have any races in between the Tenno Sho and the Japan Cup, so both of them could be prepared at their best for the Japan Cup. And this Japan Cup was stacked, including notable Prix de la Triomphe winner Tony Bin, one of the greatest stayers in Europe at that point, Moon Madness, New Zealand's Pride and Joy Bone Crusher, also Goat City, and Major Duran, who actually won quite a bit of G1 race as well. Major Duran is one of the horses I really do want to see being at Umamusume, because Major Duran definitely deserves a spot just like Major Ardon. Even though Ardon herself didn't win any G1 races, she was very prominent in Oguri's career, and with other notable horses that turned to Uma as well, like My Big Boy, Pay the Butler. So this was a very stacked Japan Cup as well, and it will be actually one of the best chance of finally another Japanese racing horse that will be able to win their own domestic World Cup for horse racing, essentially, since Simbali Rudolph's win in 1985. And because the amount of stacked opponents in this race, it was very surprising and very special for a Japanese racehorse being the favorite to win, which in this race Tamma was being the favorite to win after his triumph over Oguri at the Tenno Sho Autumn, and with the Irish racehorse Tony Bin being the second favorite to win after the Prix de la Triomphe victory, and the third favorite to win being Oguri Camp. Oh yeah, at this point I should put in a spoiler warning, because none of these have been animated yet. I mean, they have been animated already, but they haven't been released yet, and it's manga exclusive scenes. So if you don't want to be spoiled by the anime or by me, then stop watching, I guess, because this is spoilers ahead. But just keep watching. You'll get spoiled anyways in the future. But this race actually had a kind of poetic and kind of unexpected ending to this, because the 9th favorite to win, Pay the Butler, actually won this race. And he didn't win this race by a huge margin from Tammo Cross, which literally finished the race 0.1 seconds after Pay the Butler, and only lost by half a length. And Oguri finishing only 0.3 seconds after Pay the Butler, with a 1 1/4 length behind Pay the Butler. And even though Pay the Butler's father was actually a French champion, Val del Orne, I hope I didn't butcher that name, he didn't really have a remarkable racing career in France or back in America, with only one significant win in America. Also, if you want to know more about these racehorse in the 1988 Japan Cup, check out my other video on this exact race. But everyone was expecting him to win, especially when you see he was the 9th favorite to win, and everyone was expecting Tamma or Oguri to win. But that didn't happen. But what's funny is that both of the most famous Japanese horse and the most liked Japanese horse got second and third place. It was a major upset, to be honest, for a lot of people, and again shattered the dream of a Japan horse winning their own race. And this would be in a long line of droughts of Japan's defeat at their own Japan Cup. So with both of them losing to Pei the Butler in the Japan Cup, Tamma still has a 1 victory over Oguri Cap. So this would lead to their final race together, and this race is also Tamma's retirement race. And this showdown will be held on the grandest of stages, the 1988 Arima Kinen. Other notable Umamusumes in this are Super Creek and also Soccer Boy, which is Dick the Striker, which is a Umamusume Cinderella Grey exclusive character. I don't know why he's exclusive. Sorry, I don't know why she's exclusive to only, the anime. She could easily be a character in the game as well. And both of the horses would, require the strongest physical form, not only because it was Tamma's final race and Oguri really wanted to, get back at Tamma, but both of them was still the favorite to win that race, with Tamma being the first favorite to win the race and Oguri being the second favorite to win that race. One thing to note that while preparing for the Arima Kinen, Tamma Oguri was actually training at the Miho Training Center to prepare, but the amount of food decreased due to the lack of water, and Tamma wasn't really eating as much as he could, and he was in poor physical condition. And on December 15th, only 10 days before the race, Tamma stopped practicing running and only ran 6 furlongs 2 days later. And at the same time, Oguri Camp was also preparing at the Miho Training Center, and Tamma Oguri's assistant Itaka actually felt very envious that he saw Oguri's cap appetite and stamina, increasing and increasing, while Tamma's stamina and appetite decreased. And they were both living in the same environment and eating the same thing after all. And Itaka even thought about giving up the game when he thought Tamma wouldn't have the ability to compete with Oguri at his current condition. But the Oguri Camp's camp appeared and said to Itaka that it was the third challenge, and it was basically the last chance they would be able to get to race against Tamma Oguri. They even said that it was not like Tamma Oguri, who was said to be the strongest gray horse of all time, to avoid the challenge. So you know what, Itaka said, fuck it, yeah, let's participate, let's do the final race together, and then I'm gonna beat your ass. And in that race, Tamma collected around 180,000 votes and managed to beat out Oguri's 170,000 votes, and he got the favorite, of course. And this is actually the second time that Tamma has more votes for him than Oguri. The first one was of course the Japan Cup. The second is this Arima Kinen. And let's not say that race didn't have stacked opponents, with Super Creek being the 4th favorite and Soccer Boy being the 3rd favorite, and with Super Creek of him winning the Kika Show just 1 month before. And in that race, Oguri was, as expected, a little bit ahead of usual in 6th place, where Super Creek was intentionally marking Oguri Camp. Tamamo had a bad start and Soccer Boy hit the gate and was bleeding, so he wasn't be able to compete in his best form. And if you read the Umamusume Cinderella Grey manga, that exact shit happened. And Tamma Oguri and Soccer Boy actually came up from the 3rd corner. This is where both of them had the zone in the Cinderella Grey manga, and Tamma actually rushed right next to Oguri to catch up to her. And on the 4th corner, which is a straight line, which Tamma would be the best at because she was called the White Lightning 2. But unlike at the Tenno Sho, Tamma was unable to shake off Oguri, and Oguri would be able to win by half a length, and Tamma would give away the championship. And this would mark the first victory that Oguri had against Tamma Oguri, and the final victory that Oguri has against Tamma Oguri. And after this match, Oguri would inherit the title of the strongest gray horse, and Tamma would have completed a generational change and retired after that. I do get people saying Oguri at that point was the strongest gray horse, but if you look at the stats for both the Japan Cup and the Tenno Sho. I would say Tamma actually won both times because Tamma got second place at the Japan Cup where Oguri got third, and Tamma won the Tenno Sho. So in my point of view, it was a 2-1 victory to Tamma. So it is kind of unfair to Tamma that Oguri was obviously the more popular gray horse at that point, and Tamma was not obvious, but in my opinion, the stronger gray horse. But the silver lining is that Tamma got the 1988 JRA Horse of the Year award. So, you know, that's good for Tamma. And they also made a poster for Tamma in 1989, the Hero Enthusiasm number 25, which titled Wind or Light, and another portrait in 2023 called Black Shadow White Light, with the description saying, for those who are pursued, it is the shadow of fear that sprints, come to the rear like a wave, threaten their kingdom. For those who want a revolution, the dynamism and light of hope, heating the heavens and the earth until the end, open up the next era. That's why it's gray, the intersection of black shadow and white light. With Tamma having another honor, being featured in a 2012 JRA commercial with the description saying, in 1988, the Tenno Sho Autumn. Gray-haired horses can't run. Until these two appeared, people said so. A gray-haired and a gray-haired rivalry. The old enemy gets strength. Is it wind or light? The horse name is Tamamo Cross. Another tragedy I kind of think is that Tamma would have easily be included in the Heisei top 3 if, you know, he was still active in 1989, but, you know, he literally retired right before the era changed from Showa to Heisei. So, you know, it is kind of unfortunate that he was not be able to participate in that, you know, prestigious group of 3, which includes Oguri herself, of course, and also Super Creek and Inari 1. But Tamma definitely, you know, had the potential and had the ability to contest against those 3 as well. A protagonist and an antagonist. 2 legends, 1 track. Their rivalry pushed them beyond their limits and into immortality. Oguri Cap, Tamamo Cross, both are rivals and both are icons of their era. So that's all I have for this video. I hope you do really enjoy this video. I did quite a bit of research for both horses and both of their respective upbringings. So if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and, you know, I'll see you in the next Umamusume video.